Okay, so now let me create the JSON model here. So for creating a JSON model, so this is the first model. It's closing at line number 75. After that, this is the second model, which is starting from 76 and it's closing at 80. So after that, I will give comma and then I will provide the model name. So let me provide a model name as product model. Okay, so that is a name of model. And after that, I'm just going to provide a type of model. So the type of model is, so what are the type of models? 1 second. We go back here and go to API reference and search for JSON model. Okay, so I'm just going to create a JSON model. I'm just going to initialize JSON model. So this is a JSON model. So where this JSON model is located? So this JSON model is located in a library sap.ui.model.json. So we have to copy this entirely, all class, go back here and just paste it inside this type. OK, so now the type is provided. Now the model which has a type of JSON model. So next thing is how this model you want to create, whether you want to pass any information to this model, that also required, right? Because if you're creating this model, for sure it needs some data. And then what should be the data source for this model? So for that, just give one comma and after that just add data source property. And in this data source, you just have to provide the name of data source. Where it is. Yeah, that's it. OK, now the JSON model is being initialized with this data, with this product data, because we have passed that data source information to this JSON model. That's it, guys. So the one way which we have seen is through manifest.json file. So inside the manifest.json file, this is how the data will be updated and it will be stored inside product model. So the next thing is, so basically model initialization is done, data source is created and model is also updated with the data. So the next thing is how to bring this data from model and how we can pull this information from the model and how we can display this information to table. Because the table, it's a control which at the end it's a table which will display all this information in a tabular format. So how we can bring that? So we can bring that information from this JSON model with the help of data binding. So what is data binding? Data binding means it's like you're binding a data source to a control. And how model will support? Whenever you're initializing any model, instance will be created for that model. And at the same time, data binding instance is also created. Means if once any model is initialized, that instance will help you to call any method from the model. OK, because JSON model will support a couple of methods here. So if you look at this JSON model, it has a couple of methods. So let's say you want to call a method data loaded, get JSON, get property, load data, set data. So all these are properties. How you will call that? So these properties will be called based on the instance, right? It's like a constructor. So it is a constructor which we have defined. And now for this constructor, for sure, we have an instance. So that instance will be created when you initialize any model or when you initialize any control also. So now let me go back here. So now we have our JSON model ready. So the next thing is I'll just go to product info.view.xml file and I will just run this project for a second. Okay, just click on preview application, click first option. OK, fine now. So I think looks like, yeah, our application is running now. So we don't have any data so far. So now let me create a table control here. And then what we will do basically, we will do the data binding. OK, so guys, this topic is very important. Make sure that you have a total attention on it. Without JSON model, you cannot work on UI5 application. It's like a foundation for your UI5 application. You should know how the data binding is done and how the paths are being created. Okay, the way I'm providing all the paths, that also plays major role. Otherwise, data it won't display your data properly on the front end, and you won't, and there is no possibility that you can debug this XML code, because few days back when you guys are facing some issues, we can't debug view.xml file. You can't put a breakpoint in your data binding on this view.xml. You can't. Debugging can only be done on controller.js file, not on XML file. So if you're doing data binding also, still you cannot see whether what went wrong in that. Okay, so now inside this content, so I'm just going to create a table control. So for creating that, just add a table control here. So let me add a table. So I'm just using this table from SAPUI5 library. Okay, so inside the tables, we generally have a columns aggregation. So guys, if you don't know, let me explain you that also. So one second, let me duplicate this. Go to table, search for table here. So I'm using this table, okay? I'm using this sap.m.table. So it is a responsive table which I'm using now. So now let's say I want to add a columns inside this table. So for that, first of all, we need to check for aggregation. And inside that, if you see, we have a columns aggregation. Okay, so that's what I just added a columns aggregation here. Now inside the columns aggregation, what type of control we can use? So the type of thing that you can add it inside the columns is the column control. Just click on that column. Now this is the actual control that you can use. Okay, so I'm just adding column. Okay, now inside the column, what can I add? Because let's say you want to provide a name of the column. For sure, means if you're adding a column, for sure you have to provide a name of the column, right? Without providing a name, how you can define the column? So if I go to the properties, you won't see any text property where you can provide a name of the column. It's not there. Columns means the column control in this case, it is just acting as a configuration. Means it is just providing you with a couple of options for customization, like how you can align your column. You want it as a left align, center align, right align, or whether it should be responsive, whether you want to hide that column on desktop, on our mobile or tablet. So all that basic things this column will provide. This column control will provide. But what about the name? You want to provide a name to this column. So that you cannot provide directly with the help of property inside this column control. So for that we have an aggregation. So if you go to the aggregation, so there is a header aggregation in which what it says control to be displayed in the column header. So now we can use any control in this header, like you can use text control, you can use label control, right? There are different controls you can use for displaying the text. So basically for this column control, we have two aggregations. One is the footer and one is the header. So guys, so far you have seen means like you can also create a header which has two names in it, right? So let me show you that. So first is the header. Header is by default, means whenever you see any aggregation as a default, so you don't have to specify. It's optional whether you specify or not, it doesn't matter. Okay, so you don't have to specify this header because this is a default aggregation. So I'm directly providing here text. Let's say first column which I'm going to add is product ID. So there is one more aggregation inside this column, that is footer. Right, so footer. So now inside the footer also what we can add? We can add any control. Let's say I'm adding, like I'm just copying this control as it is. I'm just going to provide. That's it. And now let me see whether how it is displaying now in the application. Okay, can you see now? So on the top, I'm getting this product info, and below, if you see, we have this product ID info. Means this is like it's acting as a footer for this column. Let's say you want to display a total also, right? It's like it will act as a custom information for your footer purpose. So this is optional, guys. Generally, we don't do. OK, so I think only header information is enough for that. So let me just comment it out. And now what we have to do, we have to create a couple of columns here, right? So what are the fields inside the product.json file? Let's see one by one. So we have a product ID, we have a category, we have supplier name. So we have a date of sale, we have a status. So we can use this all. So I'm just starting with the product ID now. So product ID we already added. So now I need to add one more column because we need to add this inside the columns aggregation. So for adding one more column, we have to copy this column code and just paste it here. Remove this footer. And now you can directly write name. After that, we can add a supplier name here. Then you can add date of sale. OK, you can also add maybe main category, or what we can add here. OK, let me add a quantity here. So let me go back here in view and you can add a quantity. So 1 second, I think this and just copy the quantity and just paste here. That's it. So I think we have added how many 5 columns we have added so far in this. Now we should see 5 columns here. Yeah. So guys, if you see, we have added so far 5 columns in our table, but now we don't see any data because we haven't done any data binding, right? So we have to do data binding, then only the data will update it, or then only the data will appear in this table. So now the basic column aggregation is done. Now the next thing is now how to create a cells, because in each row we have these cells, right? You cannot add directly a row because in each column, let's say how many columns we have. So we have 5 columns. So now for each row we have 5 cells in it based on the columns. 5 columns means 5 cells in each row. So that's how your row will be created one by one. So for adding a record, for adding an aggregation concept inside this table, we have one items aggregation. OK, so for creating the rows based on cells, we can use one aggregation, that is. So let me go back in this table. So guys, if I go to this aggregation, if you see, we have only one aggregation so far, like columns. But from where that data or from where this items is coming means I'll give you one real-time example. Let me go to the samples. Let me open any one of this example and let me go to the source code. So when I go to the source codes of this table, if you see, they have added columns aggregation. But apart from the columns, if you see, they have items aggregation, right? So columns is there, items is there. And again, if you see, they have info toolbar, and then if you see, they have header toolbar. So from where all these aggregations are coming? Because in this API reference, I can see under the aggregation, we have only single aggregation, that is columns. From where they are using all these aggregations, it's not even supported to the table. So if you want to check all this information, we just have to scroll up and there is an extend. OK, at the end, there is an extend. And if you see, so this table is extending some features from list base, because list base now it is acting as a parent to this table, right? So now if I go to this list base and now if I go to the aggregation, now you will see all these different aggregations. So all these aggregations are supported to the table. Why? Because table is extending from the list base. OK, so there is some inheritance concept which is being followed in this UI5 framework. So now if I take if table want to use items or if it wants to use info toolbar, he can easily use that without any problem. So for list based default aggregation is item, but in table is items is the default aggregation? No, it is not a default aggregation to the table. So we can just copy these items now, go back here and now just add items here. OK, now inside the items, what we can add? So inside the items, you can add any list item. So when it comes to the list item, right, you can just search for list item here. So how many list items we can add? We can add action list item, column list item, custom list item, feed list item. All these are different list items. But whenever you want to go with table control, prefer only column list item. That's the best choice you can always go with. OK, don't go with other like action or something. You don't have to. If you're using table, so best practice is to go with column list item. OK, so I'm just going to use column list item now. So this is the column list item. Fine now. So now after that, after this column list item, now inside the column list item. So this column list item means it's like a single row data so far. OK, it's like this column list item will be generated dynamically on runtime based on JSON data. It's not like that let's say you have 100 records. So you have to write 100 times the same code. No, we don't have to. OK, so this column list item, it will be declared only once and it will be generated dynamically on runtime based on the JSON data. So now inside this column list item, what data and how I can add cells. So if I go to the column list item and if I check for aggregation for this column list item, you will see cells. Cells is a default aggregation for the column list item. So what it says, every control inside the cell aggregation defines one cell of the row, which is right only. So now how many columns we have? 5 columns. So 5 column means we need 5 cells, right? 5 cells means you don't have to write cells for 5 times. You can just specify 5 controls inside the cells. OK, so first cell I'm going to provide it for. First cell I'm going to provide it for the product ID. Second cell I'm going to provide for the name of product. Third is for supplier name. Fourth is for date of sale and fifth is for quantity. OK, the sequence of this cell, it should exactly match with the sequence of columns. OK, both should be similar. You cannot add the first cell. You cannot make it as that it will belong to quantity. Not like that. The sequence of column and the sequence of cell is must. It should be similar. Now, if I run also, I won't see any data so far. OK, previously I used to get no data, but now as I've added this single column list item, so I'm not getting any sign that whether the data is there or not. Right. So now this time, now let's do the data binding. OK, so for doing the data binding, first of all, we have to follow some standard binding syntax. So at the end, we have to create column list item because at the end where the data is getting displayed, the data is getting displayed inside the column list item. And this column list item, it is inside the items aggregation. So that's why here I'm going to provide items. And inside the items. So now guys, I'm going to do the data binding. So guys, you have any questions? It's clear. Can we do the data binding now?
Yeah, okay.
OK, so to do the data binding, so we will do the data binding for the table inside the items only. So in items, we will provide a main path, and after that, inside the cells, we will provide the row level binding path. Means, first of all, on the items, what I will do, I will provide the main path. Main path means, from where I need to access all the information. So for sure, I'm going to use product collection. So product collection, it will act as a main path and it will act as a main source. OK, for that items. And then after that, if you see this the product collection, it has the data in array format. Inside the array, if you see, there are a couple of objects, right? So I'm just going to provide a main path on the top, and after that it will access each and every record from individual level on runtime. So let's do one thing now. So first of all, before I do the data binding, first of all, we have to use the model because the data is available inside which model? It is available inside the product model. So this is the name of our model. Just copy that name of the model and go back to view.xml file. Now for these items, for standard binding syntax, how it works. Whenever you want to do any binding inside the XML, it has to be done inside double quotes. So that's why I have added double quotes or single quotes, both will work. That's not matter. After that, inside the double quotes, you can specify opening and closing curly braces. So curly braces are must whenever you want to do data binding. OK, inside the XML. And after that, inside this curly braces, so first of all, how your path will begin. OK, from which part your data binding should be, it should start basically. It should start from model name. If you have the model name, you provide the model. If you don't have a model name, you don't have to provide. OK, but basically your data binding syntax, it will always start from model name. So that's why I'm going to provide a model name here. And now after that, we have to use greater than sign. OK, so after that, we have to use greater than sign. And then now as soon as you provide greater than sign, after that, let's see now inside this JSON model, we have the data in this object because we have stored all this record information into this table. Sorry, into that JSON model. So this is the object, and inside the object, we have two properties, product collection and product collection start. So if I want to access this product collection property, how I generally access, guys, any idea? OK, let me go to the console. Let me give you one example here. OK, so let's consider car is the object. And now if I want to access a property inside this object, how I will access? Can I directly write color? Will it work? It won't work. So how to access that? To accessing that, I will write car dot color. So I'm using here dot here, right? Just to access this color property. So same like that, when you're doing a data binding, and if I want to access this product collection, which is inside this object, so how I will do? I'm going to use slash, and then I will access this property. That's it. OK, this is how, because in data binding, we generally use slash. So slash will help you to go one step inside the object. OK, and let's see if I want to access a single record from this object. Let's say I want to access this first record, which is on the 0th index number of array. So I have to use one more slash because I'm going inside the array. And then I have to use the index number of array 0 and then slash. And then I can use any property within that object like product ID I can use. OK, but on the main path, as this is an items, right? It's like a main path. So you can't use anything. So if I do also, I think, yeah, if you do also nothing, it won't work, first of all. OK, so till here, this is what the path we have to provide to the items. So on the top, we are just providing the main path. OK, it's like a main path. It's like a main path for the data, and the data is located inside the product collection. And now below, if you see now here, we have to do the row level. We have to do the property level binding. On the top, we have done a data binding at the main level, that is on the main data source level. Below, if you see inside the column list item, inside the cells, whatever the data binding we will do, that will be done on property level. Means, so let's say product ID, which property is bringing product ID information? The product ID property, right? So that product ID I have to bind there. Then only this product ID will bring this information. So let me show you that. Let's go back to this XML now. What I told you that if you have provided the model name, so always your data binding will start from model name. Model name greater than sign. Sorry, model name. What is model name? Product model greater than sign, and that's it. After that, product ID. So guys, this time I'm not going to use any slash. Why? Because on runtime, your column list item will be created. If you provide the slash, your rows will not be created. Okay, on runtime, each and every record will be created, and I'm what product ID will do. It will basically this data binding will help you to pull the information from that product model and for that particular property. So for that record. So it's like a loop. OK, see, this aggregation concept means you don't have to write any code for loop. Internally, a loop will run. So it will access each and every record from that product collection. And whatever the data you want to display, that will come based on these properties that you're adding in. So let me copy this. Let me paste it in all the cells. And now based on the column, I will just change name, right? So for name, which is the property which is bringing the name? So this is the property. So whatever the property names I'm specifying here that are case sensitive. Supplier name, you can just copy, you can go back and you can paste here. And then you have date of sale. So it is a date of sale, copy that, go back and paste it here. And after that, you have quantity, copy that, go back and paste here. That's it. OK, guys, the basic data binding is done. And now if I look at the output, let's see whether it's displaying or not. Can you see now data? OK, have we written any code for loop? No, we haven't written any code for loop. OK, so this is how your data will appear inside the table.